Paris Hilton is reclaiming her narrative, and this time, she's not softening the truth. More than 2 decades after a private sex video was leaked without her consent, Hilton is speaking with clarity and conviction about what she endured as a teenager suddenly thrust into global humiliation. It was abuse, she says now, reframing a moment that pop culture long treated as gossip, a punchline, or a stepping stone to fame. For Hilton, it was none of those things. It was trauma, a teenager, a violation, and a world watching. Hilton was just 19 years old when the explicit footage, recorded in the context of a relationship, was released without her permission. At the time, the early 2000s media ecosystem was brutal and unfiltered. Privacy laws were murky, public empathy was scarce, and young women, especially those already famous, were routinely blamed for their own exploitation. "I didn't consent to it being shared," Hilton has said, emphasizing that consent doesn't end at recording, it's about control, agency, and choice. When that choice is taken away, she argues, it becomes abuse. Full stop. What followed was a tidal wave of shame and ridicule. Late-night hosts joked, tabloids feasted, online forums turned cruel. Instead of outrage on her behalf, there was a cultural shrug, one that normalized the violation and minimized the harm. The cost of being turned into a punchline. Hilton has been candid about the psychological toll. The leak didn't just expose her body, it exposed the cruelty of a culture eager to punish women for their sexuality while excusing the men who profit from violating their trust. She has described feeling humiliated, powerless, and terrified, emotions that lingered long after the headlines moved on. In the years that followed, she adopted a carefully constructed public persona, part armor, part performance, to survive an industry that seemed determined to reduce her to a stereotype. That persona worked. Hilton became a household name, a business mogul, and a pop culture fixture. But success didn't erase the original wound. "People assumed I was fine because I was famous," she's explained. But fame doesn't protect you from trauma. Rewriting the narrative on consent. Hilton's decision to call the leak what it was, abuse, marks a broader cultural shift. Conversations around consent, coercion, and digital exploitation have evolved, thanks in part to survivors who refused to stay silent. She's now outspoken about how society must do better. Better laws, better accountability, and better support for victims of non-consensual image sharing. What happened to her, she says, should never be dismissed as a scandal. It was a crime that altered the course of her life. Her words also resonate with countless others who've experienced similar violations without the platform to fight back. By reframing the story, Hilton is offering validation to survivors who were told to get over it, or blamed for trusting the wrong person. From silence to advocacy. In recent years, Hilton has emerged as a vocal advocate for survivors of abuse, particularly those harmed by institutions that wield power without oversight. She's used documentaries, interviews, and public testimony to push for reform and accountability, channeling her own pain into action. Addressing the sex tape openly is part of that journey. It's not about reopening old wounds for attention, it's about closing the gap between how society talks about exploitation and how it actually affects victims. "I want people to understand," Hilton has said, "that this isn't something you just laugh off. It stays with you, a reckoning long overdue." For a long time, Paris Hilton was denied compassion. The narrative was convenient, a rich, famous young woman who benefited from controversy. But that story ignored the reality of a teenager whose trust was betrayed and whose privacy was stolen. By naming the harm for what it was, Hilton isn't asking for pity, she's demanding accuracy. And in doing so, she's helping to rewrite a chapter of pop culture history that got it wrong. The takeaway is simple, and it matters: non-consensual sharing of intimate material is abuse. Fame doesn't change that, time doesn't erase it, and finally, the world is starting to listen.